Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tim's News Explosion on this Monday, the 5th of August, 2024. We are live on the Wilms Front YouTube channel, the Wilms Front Odyssey channel, and the Wilms Front Rumble channel. Hello to everyone in the live chat. It is 9 p.m. here in Melbourne, Victoria. And today, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese held a press conference with his Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, and ASIO Director, Mike Burgess, announcing that the terror threat level was being raised from possible to probable. And the ASIO Director said this is not based on any actual intelligence or any immediate threat. So it was basically just a theatrical performance by the Three Stooges. And it was blamed on the increase in the terror threat level, both Albo and as some people have called Mike Burgess Mike Penis Head because of his bald head. So it's blamed on Australians embracing a more diverse range of extreme ideologies. And he said that it's now joins espionage and foreign interference as our principal security concern. Isn't that what ASIO basically everything it does? Just terrorism and espionage. Hello, Dawn Browning. I up terrorized folk. And so he said that that individuals are embracing anti-authority ideologies, conspiracy theories, and diverse grievances. Some are combining multiple beliefs to create new hybrid ideologies. And I won't go through the entire press conference, but I watched it in full, and it wasn't a presser, it was a pisser. I was laughing, and Anthony Albanese said, "Oh, we've all got to lower the temperature, including the media." So it's basically that because, and Mike Burgess said this, there's no longer as much trust in government and in institution. That's why we're seeing the rise in these various extremist, twisted, there was various words, twisted, hybrid, merged ideologies. So P. Cosiman says, just more of the save. Quick, give the government more power and control. We've seen this all before under John Howard. Also blamed for the increase in the terrorism threat level, which they said does not mean a terror attack is inevitable. It's always the case with these threat code systems, whether it be to do with the threat of bushfire on a given day. Remember, they say, watch out, it's a catastrophic bushfire threat. All of these various threat systems, alert levels, they're designed to basically create a sense of crisis. So, well, as P. Cosiman said, give up more of your freedom. P. Cosiman, the only ones who are raising it here are the government. The government itself is extreme. They've become too drunk on globalism. Well, it seems that they want to go back to the good old days where the major parties only disagreed on taxes, regulation, just minor differences. So they want to go back to the days of the uniparties when there was hardly any choice for voters, and they they were more open to believing what the government told them. Of course, the online world was blamed for radicalization as well. The free flow of information, which of course is they term mis and disinformation. Of course, they'd like to go back to the good old days where it's just the 3 TV networks and the newspapers and the radio. People couldn't, heaven forbid, do their own research. Also blamed for the increase in the threat level is the UK unrest, which has also been blamed, according to Wikipedia, on anti-immigration sentiment, Islamophobia, and misinformation. Anger at British authorities continues a week after the stabbing murder of 3 little girls, Alice da Silva Agia, Babette King, and Elise Stancombe at a dance class in Southport last Monday morning, UK time. It was actually breaking while I was on air, just the news that there'd been a stabbing. And of course, if there are any more breaking news developments, we will bring it to you. And now, initially, the name of the suspect was suppressed because he was a minor. He was a child. So and so we need to protect his welfare. And of course, this is the fake human rights crowd who love these sorts of name suppressions, all sorts of suppression orders, because, well, it stops inconvenient facts getting out. And of course, the fake human rights crowd, they are all about the rights of the perpetrators, certainly not with the victims. And if a judge agreed that it was in the public interest, because there was an information vacuum. This is why misinformation was spreading, because there was this name suppression. And the fake human rights, the pro diversity crowd, I could tell deep down that they were very upset that the judge allowed 17-year-old Axel Rudakubana. He has been charged with the stabbing murder of 3 girls, 10 counts of attempted murder, and possession of a bladed article. And the picture supplied to the mainstream media was when he was a little boy. And then, of course, there were the headlines that he was a quiet choir boy who never left the home. How can you be quiet if you're in a choir? That involves singing and being very loud. And though the media did report that in court he smirked and basically showed no contrition there. And also, it was later revealed that when he was 11 years old, that he featured in a BBC Doctor Who Children in Need advertisement.
It's that time of year again. You could even dress up as every Doctor Who ever is. Do your thing for children in need.
So the BBC this week, they years back, they put in an ad, a future alleged mass stabber, and also exposed this week. Remember, the BBC, they're supposed to be the most reliable source in the UK for information. They've got their BBC Verify unit. I buried in the news headlines in the aftermath of the Southport stabbing, which is in the northeast seaside of England. It was reported that the BBC's former chief news anchor, Hugh Edwards, had been charged with 3 counts of making indecent images of children. So he was considered by the BBC and the media establishment a national treasure because he was the best at reading an auto cue. And he was the only one that could tell us when the Queen died. Apparently, the British people would not have known that Queen Elizabeth II had died unless National Treasure Hugh Edwards told them. And when he arrived at the Westminster Magistrates Court, he pled guilty to those 3 counts of making indecent images of children. So there were 41 images found on a WhatsApp chat that he had with another convicted child abuser who has been also from Wales. His name is Alex Wilms. So it was the original investigation into him. He was convicted of 7 offences related to indecent images and prohibited images of children. He was given a suspended 12-month jail sentence. So seems unlikely then that national treasure Hugh Edwards will go to prison. This was kept of hush hush by the BBC. They were told by the Metropolitan Police he'd been arrested, Hugh Edwards, back in November last year. He had been on mental health leave on full pay. In fact, he got a 40k pay rise, only quit a month before he was formally charged. And again, the BBC didn't report it. Dawn Browning says Southport is in the west. Sorry, my mistake. Roundabout near Liverpool, Manchester, that side of England. So he left a month before he was charged. The rest of the media found out when the Westminster Magistrates Court charge sheet came out on the Monday. So once again, the BBC covered up for a pedophile who was working for them. This is the biggest BBC child abuse scandal since Jimmy Savile. There have been multiple pedophiles or paedophiles, as they call them in the UK, or the slang is nonce. So nonce stands for not on normal courtyard exercise. So it's a prison slang that sex offenders and pedophiles, they had to be on a separate courtyard exercise because the other prisoners would bash them because of their disgusting crimes against children. So that's where the slang nonce came from. And there was a sign that Hugh Edwards was a deviant child abuser. There was a clue when last year, and I covered it on this program, the Sun newspaper reported that Hugh Edwards groomed a crack-addicted teenager on Instagram from when they were 17 years old, paid £35,000 for explicit images and videos, and and then there was multiple allegations that came out of the BBC at the time that he'd been inappropriate with other staff members, attempted to groom them. That $35,000 would have come from his license fee, paying salary. The way the BBC is funded in the UK, it's through a license fee extortion. So Dawn Browning grew up in the UK. So if you want to own a TV in the UK, you have to pay a TV license fee, which goes to the BBC. In Australia, the ABC is funded through consolidated revenue. So it's still it's still extorted through our taxes, but it's a more indirect funding method. And the BBC, they have these basically patrol vehicles that go around and go that can read into people's homes if they've got a TV and whether they've paid the license fee. They've imprisoned people before for not paying the license fee. And of course, Jimmy Savile is, well, he was the most high-profile BBC personality to be a pedophile, but there was also Rolf Harris and Gary Glitter, Chris Langham. The list goes on and on. But when this first scandal broke, where he had groomed this teenager for explicit photos, beginning when they were underage, but the police said that there was no case to answer. The worst thing about the UK media is that they protect their own, especially the presenters at the BBC. And so the newsagents podcast on Global Player, more like Globalist Player, which is it's just full of ex-BBC journalists. It's the most biased left-wing podcast in existence. They hoped that one day Hugh Edwards would come back to read the news once again.
Do you think there's a way back to the BBC for Hugh?
Yes.
A career?
I do think that. I think in order for that to happen, lots of things have to go his way. But the country is not the Sun. The country is millions of people who all have in their own lives issues. There are lots of drugs in the country. There are lots of people that say and do things on social media and on text that they shouldn't do. There are people that are in inappropriate relationships and all kinds of things. Life is complicated. The British people are much more able to understand those nuances, I think, than you would think from reading the newspapers. So I think that my message to Hugh would be there is a way back, and let's see how it goes. It may not necessarily be quite what he was doing before, but there may be a way back.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.
Yeah, so they attacked the Sun newspaper for breaking this story. The child's mother went to the BBC first, but was basically fobbed off because, well, if you're a star at the BBC, you're protected and untouchable. That's why if you criticize Gary Lineker or Jeremy Vine, then you're attacked as well. I mean, look at Joey Barton having to pay Jeremy Vine $110,000 over the Bike Nonce hashtag. Though Joey Barton, of course, he could start a News Nonce hashtag for Hugh Edwards. Now the news agents, they've been nicknamed the fake news agents, or maybe they could have a spin-off program called the News Nonces to be presented by Hugh Edwards. So the BBC has no credibility to be the arbiters of truth and facts when they kept hush-hush that their star presenter had been charged with having child pornographic images. And at least he has been caught, though you wonder, because he was flanked at court by a bunch of Met police officers. You wonder if there was a sweetheart deal and they found they found lots more indecent images. I'm just hypothesizing here, and they're like, look, we'll just do a deal. You plead guilty. But at least he is going to be a convicted pedophile. But we won't hold our breath that he will serve time in prison because the prisons are full. And they need all those prison spaces now to lock up all of those far-right thugs and criminals. And now, of course, Jimmy Savile got away with all of the child abuse that he did. And the Director of Public Prosecutions, the Director of the Crown Prosecution Service, as it's called in the UK, when the Jimmy Savile allegations first started surfacing just before he died, was the now Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. And of course, he is letting out pedophiles, nonsense, rapists, those who've been convicted of being part of grooming gangs. There was 8 more who were charged with grooming gang offences this week, but you didn't hear much from that from the UK media and from Keir Starmer. So he held 2 press conferences attacking those all of the people who are legitimately protesting, lumping them in with those who are engaged in criminal damage, and which some of them would be far right, who would have far right ideology, whatever that means, but there'd also be opportunists and bad actors, because that's what happened in the 2011 UK riots, which were much worse. There were factories on fire, businesses that were looted, absolutely smashed. The looting occurs basically by opportunistic people. And again, Keir Starmer was in charge of the prosecution of those people at the time. So he held one press conference on the Friday and another yesterday. Here's some footage of one of them.
Exterminate! You must obey! Obey Starmer! The time has come for Starmageddon. I'm going to raise your taxes. I am going to raise your blood pressure. And I am going to raise England to the ground. Any dissenters will be exterminated. Any questions?
What consequences?
Exterminate!
That's obviously not Keir Starmer's press conference. That was a hilarious deep fake created by, I don't know who it's by. It was shared by Darren Grimes, who's a GB News contributor. Starmageddon, it's been called, exterminating his political opponents, obviously using the Daleks from Doctor Who. There's a lot of tie-ins to Doctor Who here. Maybe you could say that Axel Rudakubana could have been the new black gay Doctor Who. Now, I won't play just straight what Keir Starmer said. I'm going to play Taurine Fable's edit of Keir Starmer's latest press conference and just point out the double standard because he didn't hold a press conference with the Hare Hill riots in Leeds, which was triggered after those Roma children were removed from their neglectful parents. And obviously he took a knee during the Black Lives Matter protest during COVID, of course, in the middle of 2020. So this video, which uses Keir Starmer's actual words and has put into it, all because, of course, there has been violence from the so-called counter-protesters, which, I mean, if you're counter-protesting Brits who are angry that 3 little girls was stabbed to death by the son of Rwandan immigrants and are angry at mass migration, if you're going to be counter-protesting and you form a group, a counter militia group like Muslim Defense League, does that mean that you're pro little girls being stabbed? Anyway, this is the montage here created by Taurine Fable.
I utterly condemn the far-right thuggery we've seen this weekend. Be in no doubt
those that have participated in this violence will face the full force of the law. The police will be making arrests, individuals will be held on remand, charges will follow, and convictions will follow. I guarantee you will regret taking part in this disorder, whether directly or those whipping up this action online and then running away themselves. This is not protest. It is organised, violent thuggery, and it has no place on our streets or online. Right now, there are attacks happening on a hotel in Rotherham. Marauding gangs intent on law breaking, or worse. Windows smashed, fire set ablaze, residents and staff in absolute fear. There is no justification, none, for taking this action, and all right-minded people should be condemning this sort of violence. People in this country have a right to be safe, and yet we've seen Muslim communities targeted, attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out, Nazi salutes in the street, attacks on the police, wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric. So no, I won't shy away from calling it what it is, far-right thuggery. To those who feel targeted because of the colour of your skin or your faith, I know how frightening this must be. I want you to know that this violent mob do not represent our country, and we will bring them to justice.
This is England. This is shared land, you know? It's a shared country.
Big problem, yeah.
And you can see that Sakir Starmer in his press conference, he's trying to be a strong, authoritative leader, but you can't take him seriously. And in the election that, of course, was held on 4th of July, his government was only elected with a third of the voters. There was 60% voter turnout. So there was only three. You do the math there. So that is basically only around 20% of eligible British voters voted for Sakir Starmer and Labour. Now, I do think it's good that Sakir Starmer is not recalling Parliament to pass some draconian new legislation to crack down on civil liberties or call in the army to have martial law. He has said, no, we're going to be utilising our existing resources, though there is an emergency Cobra meeting that is occurring in Downing Street. So Cobra, again, another acronym. So it stands for Cabinet Office Briefing Room A. So it's quite an innocuous full name, but that's where the emergency meetings are held. And obviously the acronym Cobra, of course, named after a venomous snake. So Cobra meeting, there's going to be a teeth response after an emergency Cobra meeting. So we shall see here. I'll get any news alerts on my phone. Latest news alert that I've just got is that Benjamin Netanyahu says that he's close to eliminating Hamas, and the war in Gaza could be over. We shall see about that. But going back here, so there is the only opposition or voice of the anger in the UK is the Reform 5. And I have to say that I have been pleasantly surprised at Richard Tice standing up for the grievances of the British people, who protests should always be legal and lawful, and it's very clear that peaceful protests across the UK are being met with police thuggery. I mean, they should only respond if they are attacked. Like this all kicked off in Southport after a man was arrested near a mosque carrying a knife near the vigil. Though apparently he wasn't a Muslim, he just looked Arabic, but he actually had a white sounding name. And there was, did anyone see this man who got a brick to the groin after it bounced off one of the police shields? That would have bloody hurt. Now, that unrest in Southport, where the stabbing took place, which is in the northwest, that led to any protest in the UK being met with riot police, and all of the protesters are being labeled far right thugs, criminals. Keir Starmer, I didn't expect him to say that he understood people's anger at three little girls being stabbed. Remember, last year, there was the Nottingham attacks where Veldo Cullercane drove a van and stabbed 3 people to death. So the perpetrator, he was a dual Ghanaian Portuguese national. So came to the United Kingdom in 2007. With his parents, and the family moved to Wales, where they and mentioned that he was a Christian there, and they also said, oh, why were they attacking mosques, these far right, when Rwanda is a Christian nation and his parents weren't illegal migrants. But of course, we have seen, well, in the UK and Australia, migrant groups who are not Muslim, who have not integrated and been involved in criminal gangs. The South Sudanese, who most of them have come here as refugees, many of the youths in gangs. South Sudan is a Christian country, and so mass uncontrolled immigration, it leads to a lot of the new arrivals forming ghettos, not integrating, keeping their old ways and grievances. Though, of course, they said that because he was born in Wales, Axel Rudakubana, you should call him Welsh. And Katie Hopkins summed the absurdity of saying that he was a Welshman in one of her vlogs this week.
A couple of points on the stabber from Southport. Number one, he's no more Welsh than I am. His parents are from Rwanda. Just because you happen to hover your vagina over Cardiff and drop a baby out, presumably paid for by the British taxpayer on the NHS, that doesn't make your baby Welsh, now does it? If you shove a thistle up your arse, does that make you Scottish, magically, I wonder? Or if he was born in a sewer, would that make him more of a shit than he clearly is? Second up, he's clearly not 17 either. If he's 17, then I'm 22, and my wrinkles and other bits of me strongly suggest otherwise. And finally, people throw out on Twitter, oh, you guys, you're just stirring up racial tensions. No, You stir up racial tensions and hatred by going into a children's dance class and stabbing our children. That's not on us, that's on them, and they need to own it right about now. Give me 5 minutes in a room with that little shit.
And it also protests have spread to other cities and towns across the United Kingdom. So Hartlepool, Sunderland, where a police station was set on fire, Greater Manchester, and also migrant hotels have been burnt and attacked in Rotherham, which was one of the towns where the grooming gangs were allowed to run rampant, and because the authorities didn't want to be accused of being racist, and also in Tamworth. And also probably the most astonishing protest happened in Belfast in Northern Ireland, where unionists, Protestants, loyalists, and a Republican Catholic nationalist joined together to protest against their new occupiers.
Stand down, hold! Stand down, hold! Stand down, hold! Stand down!
Yeah, pedos off our streets! Pedos out! Pedos out! 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 The news will tell you there was probably 100 people here. We beg to differ. You the lads! You! Look at this. That's a fucking beautiful thing, boys. Look at that.
It's like people say that if aliens invaded Earth, all of humanity's differences would become insignificant trying to fight an alien invasion. And of course, this is on a smaller scale. Obviously, the troubles in Northern Ireland, Belfast for 30 years, which would involve Catholic and Protestant neighborhoods attacking each other when they were onto each other's turfs. And now they have, aliens who've come across to their island, both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And of course, the Irish, as I just mentioned, not just through the Troubles, but historically, they're not a very passive people when it comes to occupying peoples and armies. Later on in the day, a Middle Eastern restaurant was smashed. And I'm sure many of you remember that there was that Algerian-born immigrant in Dublin, Ireland, who stabbed. It was 5 children, though thankfully none of them died. That led to rioting in the capital, with police vehicles set on fire. Remember, the task search Leo Varadkar just talked about the far right, and he's no more. He's resigned. Keir Starmer, his approval ratings have now tanked. The Bangladeshi Prime Minister has fled the country because of the continuing unrest there. That's not a good precedent for Keir Starmer there. I've just got a BBC News alert on my phone. I'll see if this is anything significant. No, that isn't. So, and obviously, I think there is a lot of despair in the UK because they're stuck with Keir Starmer and Labour for the next 5 years, and there is no opposition. I mean, the Conservatives have their interim leader in Rishi Sunak. I mean, he probably would have been reacted worse if he was still Prime Minister. Would have recalled Parliament to pass emergency laws. That is what Priti Patel, a Conservative leadership aspirant, is calling for. James Cleverly has also talked tough on the need for law and order to be returned. I mean, James Cleverly, he's half Indigenous Brit, but is obviously visibly brown. It seems that I've shown you all this this photo before of the front runners in the Conservative leadership contest. Priti Patel, who's Indian, Ugandan. There's James Cleverly. Then, of course, there is Kemi Badenoch from Nigerian parents. So yes, the Unity Party is at its most unified in the United Kingdom. Don Browning says, a few have looked into the logistics of Ireland. You have to require strict permits for demos in Ireland. Naturally, I'm hopeful. Well, in the aftermath of the Dublin stabbings in the Republic of Ireland, several migrant hotels were set on fire. Again, I don't condone any of the violence, but it doesn't surprise me that the Irish, given their history, that they are resorting to violence against occupiers of their island. And I noticed that Sky News UK, or as it's known as Sly News, they said that these far-right people attacked hotels, that there weren't illegals in there. And the British mainstream media, they just go from a biased and misleading. I mean, they are the bigger purveyors of mis and disinformation. And of course, the English Defence League, which is, I don't know, maybe it exists in some form, but it's not led by, hasn't been led by Tommy Robinson for years. There's calls to have them designated as a terrorist organization. That's always the go-to. That we need to crack down on need to have to balance things. We need to have a crackdown, label some groups as far-right extremist groups, so the Islamists don't feel like they're targeted as much. All right, let's go over the English Channel to Paris, where the Olympics continue, which seems to have focused on this women's boxing gender sex eligibility crisis, which you call it. This is basically the number one story coming out of the Olympics, where the International Boxing Federation in 2023 disqualified Algerian boxer Imaine Khalif and Taiwanese boxer Lin Yu Ting for failing their unspecified gender sex test, though the head of the International Boxing Association, who is a Russian by the name of Umar Kremlev. So the reason why they're not in charge of the eligibility for the Olympics is because there is a dispute between the IOC and the IBA, because it is controlled by a Russian. The headquarters is now in Russia, the IOC believe that it is a mismanaged, corrupt organization. So when it comes, the reason why there has been a gender controversy in the women's soccer because FIFA doesn't have strict gender testing rules like World Athletics and World Aquatics, who control the gender testing eligibility for the aquatics and athletics. So the Matildas, they played against Zambia, where one of their players who scored a number of goals in the 6-5 game. It went by what was their name here? I'll bring it up here. This has sort of been lost here. Barbara Banda. Now, when it comes to these two boxers, both extremes in the transgender debate. So the TRAs, the transgender rights advocates, and the TERFs, trans exclusionary radical activists, are trying to weaponize basically the clusterfuck that the IOC has created when in this geopolitical sport dispute. So the IOC said that because they're female on their passport, that's good enough for them. But the thing is, because Western nations now, transgenders can change change the gender on their passport. So a trans woman in Australia, biological male, can change the gender on their passport to female, and that has led to some awkward security screenings where over in the United States, when the TSA, because they have those thermal scanners, and hang on, this woman seems to have a suspicious package around her crotch area there. Is it a concealed weapon? And so they're taken aside for extra screening, which they claim is transphobic. Now, I agree with this column by Andrew Bolt. Largely said poor Khalifi is just a weapon in the war against trans radicals. Obviously, Imane Khalif and Lin Yu Ting should be deemed ineligible if they, and the IOC should have their own gender test if they don't like the one by the International Boxing Association. But the TRA say that they should be completely eligible. They are born as women, and these nasty TERFs calling them men. Now, the TERFs, they calling them men is, well, nobody knows that for a fact, because, well, the statement they are relying on is by the Russian president of the IBA, Umar Kremlev, who said that they have XY chromosomes, which is male, but they are not transgender. And it's all that we should concern ourselves about is if they are eligible. We shouldn't. It's not up to us to decide whether they're male and female. We need to have, obviously, compassion for these boxers. In Algeria, it is illegal to be homosexual and transgender. And when Imane Khalif was born, the doctor would have said, "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Khalif. It's a girl," and would have done how doctors all over the world assign sex at birth by whether the baby has a penis or a vagina. There are some TERFs who are claiming that this is a mass conspiracy by the Algerian authorities because apparently the birth certificate was issued in 2018, even though being transgender is illegal over in the UK. These TERFs are trying to claim that the country of Algeria should now force them to live as men. Now, obviously, it's obviously crushing for them because they all they knew was being a woman. That's how they were raised. That's how they obviously looked on the outside. And obviously, particularly for Amin Khalif, it would be humiliating, crushing, devastating to find out when you've become an elite athlete that you've got this DSD, disorders of sex development, which is not transgender. Obviously, the reason why these gender sex tests are done is to make sure that the women's competitions are fair and equitable. There, of course, was that South African female runner who was disqualified for having above testosterone. I see, and also the TERFs, they say that pronouns shouldn't be enforced, but whenever somebody calls Iman Khalif a woman, they say, you mean he. And there've been some, a lot of the memes have been that, a lot of mailboxes can decide to be female, except these mailboxes weren't designated as female at birth. So I think Andrew Bolt, largely in this article, he has got it right here. I know that a lot of the TERFs and their supporters are saying, just look at Khalif, you can tell. Well, there are a lot of mannish looking biological women. So I do not want us to go down, particularly because the IOC is basically squibbing it here. I don't want in the future some crazy TERFs accuse manly looking biological females of being men. And apparently now that because they say sex is determined at birth, apparently not now. So I saw somebody some commentator say, does that mean that we have to assume that all women all around the world are actually men until they take a gender test? Who knows? Maybe one of these TERFs, if they took one of these tests, might find that they've got disorders of sex development, and that's why they look butch or manly. So again, this is like obviously these TERFs are about protecting women and girls. The last thing that they should degenerate into, and I'm separating, I'm saying that because the IOC has squibbed this, then there is going to be basically these transvestigators and accusing manly looking female athletes who don't have a DSD, disorders of sex development, and they might just randomly accused of being men, which of course is attacking a woman. But of course the trans lobby, they of course want to the LGBTQIA+, I stands for intersex. They want to tie in intersex with their alphabet as well. So, of course, which is they claim that there's no issue here. They are 100% female. They've got no physical advantage. They just look manly, which is also not true either. Though one thing that has been overlooked in these attacks on these boxers in the female category who have DSD is the fact that that a convicted child rapist was allowed to compete in the Olympics for the Netherlands, Steven van der Vel, and this was in a news.com.au opinion piece. So says, comment, if someone asks you which athlete would cause the most controversy at the Olympics Games, would it be a convicted pedophile allowed to play volleyball or a woman beating a woman in women's boxing? No, not the pedophile, silly. The very idea. Everyone seemingly has forgotten about him, perhaps aside from his victim. So Stephen, van der Vel. So that is a photo of him there. He's been knocked out of the competition. So he is currently 29 years old. But when he was 19, he corresponded with a 12-year-old girl. He sent her a friend request on Facebook. He said he believed the girl was 16 at the time they began to communicate, but he continued despite her telling him her age. So in 2014, he traveled to her hometown in Milton Keynes, England, gave her alcohol and raped her near a local lake, and attempted to stay at a hotel with her, but was denied a room, so he slept under a staircase. Then there were 2 further instances of rape the next day. During one of the 3 rapes, the victim told Van der Vel that he was hurting her. So then Van der Velde, he returned to the Netherlands and told his victim to go to a sexual health clinic for contraception, which alerted concern amongst the staff. He was then extradited to the United Kingdom and arrested in January 2016. The victim expressed a feeling of guilt and had been self-harming and once overdosed, facts that caused the judge to give Van der Vel a scathing rebuke, and was sentenced to 4 years imprisonment and placed on the UK sex offender registry, where his name remains. And so under a treaty between the Netherlands and the UK, Van der Vel was transferred to the Netherlands to serve his sentence. The sentence was at the time just in line with Dutch law, and the charge was substituted for one referring to sexual acts that violate socio-ethical norms, so not child rape. After serving 13 months of his original 4-year sentence, he was released from prison. And when he was released, he complained about all the nonsense reporting on his crime in the media. So basically saying, I'm not a nonce, it's nonsense, and claiming the term pedophile did not apply to him. So he has no contrition at all, and has been allowed to resume his beach volleyball career and represent the Netherlands. And even more disturbing is that he is now married a woman and now has a child with her. So, and this is obviously this is shocking to all of us, but in mainland Europe, especially France and the Netherlands, it's not considered as heinous to rape a child. Obviously, it's still illegal, but well, that's why Roman Polanski has been able to, despite being a convicted pedophile in the United States, also raping a 12-year-old, drugging her with alcohol. That's why he's been able to work freely in Europe for the rest of his career. So he's been eliminated from the tournament, and he was banned from speaking to the media. But I noticed that the turf website Redux, with the double X, has exactly 0 articles about this convicted child rapist of a 12-year-old girl on their website, because it has got plenty on the boxes with disorders of sex development. I mean, if if Stephen Van der Vel had committed the rape of this girl while wearing a wig and a dress, would that warrant an article from Redux? And maybe this hasn't been much attention on him because he doesn't look like a stereotypical pedophile. He's not fat and disgusting. He's, well, if you saw a photo of him, you'd say, oh, that's an attractive Dutchman there. But obviously, he's still a pedophile child rapist. I remember there was a young swim coach in North Sydney who was convicted of molesting girls at the swimming pool. Was very good looking. They're not all the pedophiles are fat and disgusting like the ones that Alex Rosen from Predator Poachers catches. You would hope that if someone like a pedophile like him tried that again today, he would be caught by one of the pedophile poachers or that are going around, because they seem to be obviously quite. They seem to be quite, well, shameless is probably an understatement in scanning online for victims to groom and rape. But thankfully we've got Alex Rosen and Predator Poachers and all the other people. Did you see that another Predator Poachers group found an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn, New York, tried to meet a 13-year-old boy for sex? Now, time for some other Olympic news, where Australia has had a extremely successful games so far, particularly in the aquatics. We're not predicted to do well in the athletics, but we are currently 4th in the medal table with 12 gold, 11 silver, and 8 bronze. And in our number one sport, swimming, we have the biggest tally, which is despite the fact that several of our swimmers have tested positive to COVID, despite the fact they all arrived in Paris wearing masks. So the fact that there has been, so we had Zach Stubley Cook won a silver medal in the 200-meter breaststroke. He tested positive for COVID afterwards, but Lani Pallister tested positive before her swimming event, so withdrew from the 1500-meter freestyle, which she could have won a medal in, but participated in the women's 4x200 freestyle relay, and said that she was in isolation because she didn't want to infect her teammates. But they've still won medals despite testing COVID positive, which, why are they testing in the first place, given that they're still able to win gold medals? But of course, the COVID crazies are like, well, they could have infected somebody else and given them long COVID, or they could get long COVID afterwards. And also, BMX gold medal winner Sayai Sakakibara won gold despite testing positive for COVID earlier in the week. Dedicated it to her brother, who was brain injured in a BMX bike accident. And now imagine if she had been told by the Australian Olympic community, you can't participate because you've got COVID. That would have been absolutely catastrophic for her. They're willing to, the AOC with their, again, they didn't back in Rio test for cold, flu, RSV. So why have they still got this COVID testing theatre? They don't know that they're sick until they test for COVID, and yet they're still winning medals here. I mean, seriously. Now, of course, the Olympic Village has been touted as the most green friendly ones. They have to sleep on cardboard. The athletes, they're not allowed air conditioning. And also, they're limiting the amount of meat consumption to, of course, save the planet. Yet the mayor of Paris can't fix the pollution in the River Seine. Do you see that guy vomiting after finishing in the triathlon? I mean, if you talk about biological disorders, you might develop one after swimming in that one. Maybe the Seine is full of dead bodies, like the River Thames. Remember when they tried to retrieve that acid thrower Abdul Azidi? They found a whole bunch of other dead bodies as well. Maybe the Seine River in Paris is the same. Maybe that's where those freaks from the opening ceremony appeared from. They're just actually mutants from the river. That's what the Last Supper on the Seine was. Just these freaks coming up from the river. But one Olympian has their own source of protein. Australian beach volleyballer Zachary Schubert, who said that he munches on crickets and has established a cricket farm on his family property. And so, of course, this is great propaganda for the World Economic Forum. Eat the bugs. See, our Olympians, they're able to get their strength and protein from bugs, so it's good enough for the rest of us. Remember actress Nicole Kidman sat down for a 3-course meal in eating bugs. So you've also got an Australian actress as well promoting bug eating as well. Now, back here in Melbourne, we have, despite the Victorian government being broke, which is part of the reason why the Victorian Labor government is now 50-50 two-party preferred with the Liberal National Party opposition led by John Pesciuto. Now, despite the state being broke, in large part because of the big build and the CFMEU corruption, inflating the construction prices, they've still found $10 million to waste to give to the Burnett Institute, which advocated for COVID zero policies during the COVID lockdowns. They made a lot of money in Victoria during COVID. They were paid to produce these doomsday modelling. This is their executive director, Professor Brendan Crabb, more like Professor Crap. So they get paid to do this doomsday modeling, which would never come true. And they say, oh, it's because we all abided by the restrictions and wore masks. One of their studies during the lockdowns was that Victoria's outdoor mask mandate worked, and their study relied on photographs of people wearing masks outside in the Age newspaper. That's how scientific it was. And so because they can't advocate anymore for lockdown and mask mandates, their new crusade is clean indoor air. And so they have got a $10 million grant to just investigate indoor clean air standards. So this is just basically a rort to pump up the bottom line of the Burnett Institute, whose revenue is down post-COVID. And this was this article about Victoria's new clean air project could help end the COVID pandemic and boost productivity. So by Hayley Gleason, who is the ABC's COVID bedwetting reporter, paid for by us. I mean, there's plenty of waste in the ABC. Did anyone also see another ABC online waste of article on the threat or the threat of active clubs and white supremacy groups targeting young men, a threat to social cohesion. So that was by their politics reporter Lexi Yelmwork, and both these articles, they're both lazy journalism, just promoting their preferred experts to basically lend so their article appears credible. Though going back to this here, so according to Haley Gleason, the COVID pandemic is still continuing, but if we just spend billions of dollars in having these air purifiers in public indoor spaces, the pandemic will be over and it will end. And it will prevent the next pandemic, apparently. So if there's a bird flu pandemic and we've got clean air, does that mean that there's going to be no lockdowns and masks? I don't think the Burnett Institute would say we've cleaned the air, so we don't need to worry about if there's another respiratory virus pandemic. They would be gunning for lockdowns and masks again. So, as I was saying, this is just a complete waste of our money, a rort. And back in 2022, the Victorian government spent $100 million on air purifiers in schools, primary and secondary schools. They were going to produce a study whether it would work, but they didn't work. Otherwise, they would have, if they did work, they would have produced the study that said they did work. And so they just decided to not release it. So the only winner out of that was Samsung, who's was able to supply the Victorian government with $100 million worth of their air purifiers. Now, in other health, other disease outbreaks in Victoria, so we've had a local monkeypox cluster from men who have sex with men. The latest one has been Legionnaire's disease. So there has been a cluster of 86 cases. There have been 2 deaths, a woman in her 90s and a man in his 60s. Now, Legionnaire's disease, in case you don't know what it is a bacterial infection which can affect water cooling towers at public facilities. It can be in air conditioning systems or heating, ventilation. Often they're used in factories to keep down the heat in the buildings. So 2 weeks after the outbreak began, the Victoria's crack contact tracers, remember how good they were during tracking COVID cases. They believe that they finally found the source of the outbreak, which is a cooling tower in Laverton North in Melbourne's inner west. Now, Legionnaire's disease cannot be passed person to person. It's only by the water cooling towers breathing in the water droplets from the bacterial infected water towers. So most cases with symptoms are with adults over 80. Now, approximately 75 of the confirmed cases and 8 of the suspected cases had spent time in hospital as a result of their infection. So there's probably a whole bunch more who had mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. So again, the lesson from here is that, well, there are going to be, sadly, disease outbreaks from time to time, and governments who claim that they can keep you safe by regulating and locking down and we can find the source. I mean, they're of course the public trust in government, which is why the terror threat level has been raised, it was eroded, in the biggest way because of the COVID lockdowns, mandates, vaccine mandates, denial that there were adverse reactions. Now, going back to sport for a moment. Now, I remember a couple of weeks back, I talked about Collingwood's captain woke, Darcy Moore, sleeps in a separate bed to his girlfriend to fight patriarchal hetero norms. Well, no matter how woke a football club is these days, they still get accused of racism. And the latest in the firing line is the current Collingwood CEO, Craig Kelly. No relation to the ex-politician Craig Kelly. So he is being sued by the former head of Collingwood's First Nations strategy, Mark Cleaver. He's filed a compensation lawsuit in the Federal Circuit Court for compensation for hurt, humiliation, distress, and economic loss. And he's also accused Craig Kelly of assault, and he identifies as gay and non-binary. And he was given this position because the Collingwood wanted to have less accusations of racism after their 2021 Do Better racism report, which led to Eddie Maguire stepping down as president. That he called for that report because former Collingwood player Harry Lumumba, used to be known as Harry O'Brien, said that he experienced racism at the club. And if you hire racism consultants to find racism in your club, of course they're going to find racism. That's how they get their money, and that's also their ideology as well. So no matter how woke you are, you'll eventually you will be consumed by the woke, well, the woke people that you've employed in the club. And so this is some of the distress that Craig Kelly is alleged to have caused Mark Cleaver. And this is in a meeting for the need for a cultural room. He said that Mr. Cleaver told him next step is go through all the cultural artifacts with Leon Davis to decide what goes in the room, who's ex-Collingwood Indigenous player who they've employed as Indigenous consultant. The document then says Mr. Kelly picked up a mangarook, a ball made of possum hair used in Indigenous people in Victoria, that was on the desk, and said, "I don't give a fuck what you put in there. Put this shit in there," and forcibly threw the mangarook at Mr. Cleaver. The mangarook hit Mr. Cleaver, which humiliated them and caused them pain because of their paralysia caused by their multiple sclerosis. He continued talking and said, "I don't give a fuck if you put a fucking live possum in there. Just get Jeff, the Indigenous Vice President, Jody Sizzler off my ass." Miss Brewer is alleged to have responded by saying, "Great one, Ned Kelly. That's not culturally safe." Then he laughed, prompting Miss Brewer to say not appropriate. And then he's alleged Mr. Kelly to have said, "I know that's not appropriate." So it also detailed how Collingwood met with Indigenous support group Dawi Munro on March 18. The organisation claiming it had not been paid $500,000 promised from CGU sponsorship funds after the Do Better racism scandal. Again, this is just another Indigenous bureaucratic rort, but in the AFL sector. And then after Mr. Kelly said he really cared about our Indigenous people, document says Indigenous elder Auntie Carol Thorpe said, "You don't say our, we don't belong to you." As they drove from the meeting in Mr. Kelly's car, the document alleged that the club chief executive asked, "Who was that old bird?" After Mr. Cleaver told him it was Auntie Carol, the wife of Darradu Mangaroa Chief Alan Thorpe. The complainant said complaint came, Mr. Kelly laughed and said, "That dumb old bitch was really angry, but I got her to come around." As they drove back to Collingwood office, a Free Palestine sign was painted on the building. Mr. Kelly said, quick, take a photo of that, send it to Galtwich and watch her go off. He was referring to Galt Yari, who was Collingwood's Executive General Manager for People and Culture and is Jewish. So it is further alleged in the documents about halfway through the office on about High Street, Hoddle Street, an Asian lady was walking across the road nearing the middle of the road. Mr. Kelly swerved the car and it passed so close by her, yelled statistic and laughed. Another exchange in his car, Mr. Kelly's alleged to said, "Why do you need to use Google Maps? I assume your people can navigate things with their eyes closed." Earlier in the trip, Mr. Cleaver, who documents details, identifies non-binary and gay alleged, Mr. Kelly said, "We're taking my car. It's a real man's car." So, yeah, it's just basically, so Craig Kelly was a 1990 premiership player with Collingwood, is now turned CEO. So basically, he's just a gruff-talking CEO, which there are there. And this precious petal here, Mark Cleaver, hurt his sensibilities. And so it's racism, assault. And so he's suing for compensation. And still playing out in the courts today is the racism allegations against the former Hawthorn Premiership captain, Alistair Clarkson, now coach of North Melbourne, and his former assistant, Chris Fagan, now coach of the Brisbane Lions. Remember, Alistair Clarkson had to take stress leave. So I should mention before we move on that the Collingwood president, Jeff Brown, is standing by Craig Kelly. Won't call Mark Cleaver a liar, but basically said that our internal investigation cleared Craig Kelly. These are all allegations in these court documents. And the AFL has said that it's an internal workplace matter. And the AFL, they also determined that there was no case to answer by the former coaches. Now, remember, this racism report, which led to these 4 ex-Indigenous players who are anonymous until they outed themselves, and it was led by former Premiership Indigenous Hawthorn player Cyril Rioli, and it was all it was all triggered because Cyril Rioli's wife claimed that Jeff Kennett's lame joke about her ripped designer jeans and offered to give her some loose change to fix them was racist, and she carried on at the football club. And she wasn't taken seriously. They just treated me like an angry black woman, and they probably just cracked it because you can only be so placate the woke, go to the woke agenda for so long before you crack it. What made Collingwood crack at Harry O'Brien, Harriet Lumumba, that he exited the club, was that he got triggered because there was some text written on a photogenic poster of some Collingwood players where it said "Off to the Mardi Gras boys," and Harry Lumumba, Harry O'Brien, "This is homophobic," and they just cracked it at him. So this federal court action is because they went to the Human Rights Commission court, Human Rights Commission mediation. So if you have a racism complaint, you have to go to the Human Rights Commission. Now it's in the federal court, so it's not over for these. They've denied all wrongdoing, Alistair Clarkson and Chris Fagan, and of course they continue to coach Indigenous players. They claim that they were subject to unlawful discrimination, suffered distress, psychological harm, and personal loss of earnings and loss of earning capacity there. So this continues as well. Now, despite all this, the wokeness that the AFL has fostered, now consuming it, the AFL has signed off on a new social inclusion clause to diversify match broadcasts from the 2025 season. So Fox Footy and the 7 Network, they are not allowed to have all commentary teams of white men sitting behind a desk for every single broadcast. So they've got to have female broadcasters and also minority groups as well. So, well, in the case of Fox Footy, that's already covered with they employ Kelly Underwood, who, well, an example of her great commentary is she calls GWS the Orange Team, and they also employ Eddie Betts as a commentator. In my opinion, can't speak proper English. He seems to speak some sort of Aboriginal English, but of course ticks the diversity boxes, and he's also an activist as well. Now, moving on to other Indigenous news. So Anthony Albanese made his annual pilgrimage to the Garma Festival in Arnhem Land, and so did the ABC. They held their Insiders episode at the Garma Festival and interviewed Anthony Albanese, and he said that he doesn't support a Makarrata Commission truth-telling, but supports Makarrata, so which he defines as always talking with Indigenous people, which of course despite 60% of Australians voting no to the Voice, there's still a lot that just want the other aspects of the Uluru Statement from the Heart Treaty and truth-telling to just be implemented anyway, even though the Australian people, they vote against the first part, so it should just all be ditched now. And Anthony Albanese said he's not doing a federal treaty, but that's at the state and territory levels. And he also has ended the mining lease at Jabiluka in the Northern Territory, and is making it part of the Kakadu National Park, which seems to just spite he's just wanting to spite Peter Dutton's nuclear push by shutting down a uranium mine. But at least in Kakadu National Park, all Australians can enjoy it, unlike Mount Warning, where climbing enthusiast Mark Hendricks has been fined $300 because it has been shut down now, access to Mount Warning by New South Wales Department of National Parks. Spent $200,000 taxpayer fund keeping the mountain closed, including $7,000 a week on security, because the Wollongong Consultative Group claims that Mount Warning is the spiritual significance of the so-called Bunjawang Nation and believes only male members of that tribe should have access. So misogyny is okay if it's Indigenous. However, a rival Indigenous group claims the mountain belongs to the Yukum and Nagro Gethra people and contains important women's law sites. And John Ruddock, the Libertarian Party MLC, decided he would climb it as well as an act of civil disobedience. They held a rally, libertarian activists demanding that public access be reopened, and they also heard from a local Indigenous man who said, I'm paraphrasing here, that the ban was bullshit. So that is the latest, of course. The fact that all of these shutting down of public access to our great outdoors, it's just basically a spite thing against white people and again, it's basically forms part of the Great Australian Land Giveaway, as it's known. So Anthony Albanese, he's still continuing with all of this placating to the Aboriginal industry, who will never be placated. But while he should be focusing on cost of living and certainly shutting down a uranium mine, that is shutting down a productive economic activity, even though it can't be used for domestic nuclear energy. It can be sent overseas to be enriched in other countries' nuclear power plants. We had $100 billion wiped off our stock exchange today. We will see with the opening of the European and also the North American stock exchanges opening, just how bad this could get. Means that the likelihood of a interest rate rise by the Reserve Bank tomorrow is unlikely, even though inflation is at 3.8%, actually increased in the last quarter to 1%. Cost of living still going up. Food, housing, and alcohol and cigarettes. Government excise went up on alcohol and petrol. They think we wouldn't notice in a cost of living crisis. We've had another regional airline placed into voluntary administration, Rex Airlines. We just had the collapse of Bonza. 350 workers have been immediately stood down, with 610 jobs expected made redundant. But they're told there's insufficient funds for wages and redundancy entitlements, even though there was a last-minute change to the remuneration package of the CEO, Neville Howell. He's entitled to a 12-month salary payout of his $352,000 salary. That was updated if his job is made redundant or changes with the restructuring. And EU consultants, who are the administrators, are going to make $500,000 from it, estimated there. There hasn't been a comment in the chat for a while. Please let me know if you are still there, that everything's working like the sound and everything, because there was a bit of an issue last week. And we are bracing. We're told to brace for a Iran reprisal attacks on Israel after it actually happened a month ago. So Israel killed a Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, in Iran by a short-range projectile. Now, this will just be another, what do you call it? What is it? Missile theater. So basically a fireworks display, like what happened a couple of months ago. So Iran will just fire some missiles into Israel, which will be shot down by the Iron Dome. They'll claim that that's good enough for us, because Iran doesn't have a death wish. They vowed severe revenge, you'll all pay. That's often what China says as well, you'll all pay. And now we just had Peter Dutton have a 3-day visit to Israel. How come he's not focused on the cost of living back in Australia? He had an hour meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, even though he's not head of state or head of government. He's an opposition leader. Although back home we have Tony Burke, the new immigration minister, who's a lecturer at 25% Muslim, Watson, in Western Sydney. He is going to be allowing for a new permanent a migrant visa category for Palestinian refugees. And of course, if you're worried about social cohesion, don't import more people who have foreign loyalties. They're not going to be loyal to Australia. They're going to be loyal to Palestine. It's very clear. Now, we had the United States, the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, said that we had nothing to do with the missile attack. Now, Anthony Blinken and the Biden administration, they brokered a prisoner swap but which involved Evan Gershkovich, the imprisoned Wall Street journalist in Russia, in exchange for, there was a couple of other prisoners in Russia who were transferred to the United States, and Russian prisoners in the West who were transferred to Russia, including a convicted hitman in Germany, which obviously which some are claiming this sends the wrong message, but I doubt that a hitman is going to be allowed into a Western nation. He was originally arrested in Germany. Now, Donald Trump said that this was a victory for Vladimir Putin because he did better out of the deal. He also says that the Democrats they and Kamala Harris hate Israel. They don't like Jews. In fact, he went on a Jewish radio program in New York City last week, Sid and Friends, hosted by Sid Rosenberg, where he's trying to chase. And remember, the Jewish American vote is really small. Most of them still vote Democrat. I mean, Blinken is Jewish. Yellen is Jewish. Biden chief of staff Ron Klain is Jewish, but well, this is how Donald Trump's pitch to Jewish American voters ended.
Any Jewish person that voted for her or him or whoever it's going to be, I assume it's going to be her. Anybody that did that should have their head examined. If you love Israel, or if you're Jewish, because a lot of Jewish people do not like Israel, and they happen to be in New York. You know that.
Yes.
But if you are Jewish, regardless of Israel, if you're Jewish, if you vote for a Democrat, you're a fool, an absolute fool. They have let Jewish people down since Obama at levels that nobody could believe possible. 15 years ago, the strongest lobby in all of Washington was Israel. It was by far the strongest lobby. Nobody would say anything bad about Israel. Today, it's like nobody says anything good, except Republicans, by the way. Nobody says anything good about it. So it's a hell of a change. I assume you know exactly what I'm saying.
Oh, I know.
15 years ago, you couldn't say a bad thing.
No.
You'd be out of office.
Yeah.
And today, it's almost like, Schumer has become a Palestinian. Chuck Schumer is officially now a Palestinian.
It's funny, but it's true. It's sad. He is. And they tell me that this Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, Mr. President, is Jewish. He's Jewish like Bernie Sanders is Jewish. Are you kidding me? He's a crappy Jew.
Yeah.
He's a horrible Jew.
Now, Trump was condemned for saying nothing in response to Sid Rosenberg calling Kamala Harris's Jewish husband, Doug Emhoff, a crappy, horrible Jew. And of course, Kamala Harris, she could pick a Jewish VP running mate, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, also known as Jewish Obama. He's got a net favorability of 30 plus in Pennsylvania, and he of course supports all of the Democrats' social re-engineering, where still wants porn books in schools. He tweeted back in 2020, "Trans women are women, pass it on." He called Project 2025. Or he said he agreed with somebody in the audience that Project 2025 is some scary shit, even though, Project 2025 killed itself this week, with the Heritage Foundation shutting down policy work on Project 2025, and the head of the project, Paul Dans, stepping down, and the Trump campaign team, which of course there is the Chris Lakasha, I think that's how you pronounce his name. They put out a statement saying that they welcome the demise of Project 2025, and that if you try to put out policy and attach President Trump's name to it, it will not end well for you. So that's how dead Project 2025 is that it killed itself. And so we also, speaking of, attempted killing, Mark Zuckerberg has apologized to Donald Trump for Meta accidentally suppressing images of Trump's assassination. Remember, he called Mark Zuckerberg Trump's fight after he'd been shot as badass. But it still seems like it's a long time ago. Well, if you listen to the mainstream media, they of course are pumping up Kamala Harris. There's more polls, which Trump is still ahead in most of the swing states, favorite to win the electoral college. But there's more polls which are claiming that Kamala is ahead in the polls, and it was probably Trump's advisors that told him to go to the National Association of Black Journalists, where he said that he didn't know Kamala Harris was black until very recently because she'd always identified as Indian American. Of course, she has Indian mother and a black father, so she's half Indian, half black. So she gets, because she's biracial, she gets to have multiple identities. And of course, she can counter that she hates Israel or anti-Semitic with her Jewish husband, who Doug Imhoff, who it's just been revealed cheated on his first wife with the babysitter. So, well, he's got that in common with the last female Democrat nominee's husband, Hillary Clinton, of course. Bill Clinton, well, he had more than one extramarital affair, including under the Oval Office desk. Now, another bit of other UK news before we finish here is that Kyle Rittenhouse, he originally was going to put out a video that he was going to write in Ron Paul, but after lobbying by the Trump campaign, he's now voting for Donald Trump. Maybe they promised to make him head of the Secret Service. There was some MAGA saying, oh, we should never have advocated for him since he's not voting for Trump. We advocated for him because he did the right thing, acted in self-defense and killed a known pedophile and a domestic abuser. We also had Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, veto a plea deal for the 9/11 attacks mastermind, who goes by, I'll make sure that I name and shame him here. So his name is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And there's another one, Walid Mohammed Saleh Marak bin Ashrik and Mr. Ahmed Adim Allah, because they would have taken the death penalty off the table. Also, we've had, just to finish off with other Islamist attack news, 2 Spaniards have been beheaded in the city of Valencia in Spain. So, yes, the whole world is in turmoil at the moment, both economically, civilly, and politically. So thank you so much for your company once again. Remember, I cannot do this without your support, so please consider taking out a Unshackled membership at the unshackled.net /membership. I remember we have bronze membership $5 per month, silver $10 per month, gold $25 per month, and platinum $50 per month, or bronze $50 per year, silver $100 per year, gold $250 per year, or platinum $500 per year. The unshackled.net is still the home of our articles, but it is the Unshackled Substack where I post the Unshackled Productions content and also email alerts, so you can take out a monthly $5 per month, annual $50 per year, a founding member for $500 per month. I'll put the link in there. Also, there'll be new reports from Tiger Mountain coming out with Richard Wollstonecroft later in the week. There, I'll let you know if there's more Wilms fronts. Otherwise, I'll see you at same time next week, 9 p.m. Melbourne time, on the Wilms Front YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. Make sure you've subscribed, give a thumbs up, like, comment below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you later. Stay safe, stay sane, stay optimistic, and I'd say enjoy the weather change here in Melbourne, because it's actually quite pleasant. All right, good night.
Tim's News Explosion. 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 Tim's News Explosion.